So Tommy Robinson is free, as hopefully you all know now. And that's great. That's super fantastic. Like, that is just absolutely incredible. But we're not done. This is just a small victory in the long run. Now, as you'll see on the cover of this Independent article here, Tommy Robinson free from prison on condition he attends new hearing. So they didn't really rule that he didn't break the law. What they did was they ruled that we got to redo the hearing again. We got to redo the trial, which is great. Like, don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. That's great. But this is still ongoing, which brings me to a few things. Like, what do we do now? Like, there's stuff we have to learn from this here. We got to make sure this never happens again. And obviously, I'm not saying the law is the fault is entirely on Tommy Robinson. I'm saying there are certain things we can do to prevent this from happening again. And one is just to, like, be aware of the law. I see too many people, like, it's great to go gung-ho and into things and into activism and fight for what you believe in. That's great. But the issue is when you're risking breaking the law, or when you actually break the law, like, that doesn't do anyone any good. Luckily, Tommy Robinson has so much support that, we didn't forget about him when he was in jail. Like, we were constantly, like, you heard his name everywhere still while he was in prison. In fact, I would think more so. It seemed, at least to me, like more so while he was in prison. You heard about him. But he can't do activism from prison. He can't do anything from prison. And that's why when it comes to actually, like, activism and protests and that, we have to remember that you have to do everything within the constraints of the law. Because as soon as you break the law, well, again, you're a lawbreaker now. You're a criminal. And, like, that it's hard to it gets harder to defend your actions like that. And of course, there's so much we can do without breaking the law. And I think people have to remember that. The people have to remember how important it is to, like, keep that in mind, that, hey, like, there is law here, and they will look for any reason to throw you in prison, whether legitimate or not. So don't break the law. Like, make sure you're always within the constraints of the law. Because I was listening to some show where a guy called in from the UK, and he stopped paying some tax. I forget what tax it was, but he just stopped paying tax. And he was like, well, I'm getting letters in the mail. Eventually, like, the police will come for me. And it's like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't make principled stands against the law, because you'll be thrown in jail and no one's going to care. It's going to be like, oh, this is bad. But then a week later, like, assuming you're not a big name person like Tommy, that's it. Like, that's all there is to it. And that sucks. That's unfortunate that that's the way things are. But that's what you have to do. You have to keep in mind that, like, you have to actually get stuff done. You have to be pragmatic about things. Like, making a principled stand does nothing if you're thrown into prison. So that's just one thing to think about, at least. Just make sure you're always within the constraints of the law. That I'm not putting any blame on Tommy here. I'm not saying, like, oh, it's all Tommy's fault, he's a criminal. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we have to be wary of the law, and we always have to work within the constraints of the law, because as soon as that gets out of hand, it just does nobody any good, both in terms of public image and just it weakens us. Like, it's not good. If there are laws passed that are absolutely atrocious, like, you repeal them. The first step is then to repeal them, and then you can continue with what you're doing. I suppose if you get a large enough amount of people to disobey the law, depending on what kind of law that is, then sure. But again, like, we're unfortunately trapped within the law, and that includes unjust laws. So you got to be wary of that. But second, networking. Like, Tommy Robinson, I only figured out I only learned about him maybe less than a year ago. And there's so much going on. It's like, this guy, I can't believe more people don't know about him. And it seems like there's been a lot of networking going on from this Tommy Robinson case. A lot of new people finding out about him. A lot of new stuff going on. There are a bunch of new people that are now involved in this, are now aware of things that they weren't aware of previously. And that's important. We need to keep that networking. And that also means that we have to watch out what people are saying about all this. Like, you see, like, obviously, whenever something big happens, you'll see various media organizations try to spin it one way or the other. Again, like, this happens on both sides. This happens with everything. But, like, here with the Independent painting Tommy Robinson as far right. I suppose, again, depending on your ideology from the Independent, far right is an entirely subjective term. So I suppose it's fair to call, like, again, depending on the outlet, since it's such a subjective term, calling him far right isn't necessarily slander. It's not necessarily even unfair. However, like accusations of being alt-right, of being like a white supremacist, stuff like that, of being a fascist, like we know all this stuff isn't true, and who knows if people try to paint him that way. So that's something we have to remember, that now that his name is out there, now is the time to let people know like who he really is. Now is the time to tell people about him. Now is the time to make, when people look like, who is Tommy Robinson? Are they going to go to an article on a left-wing site that says he's a neo-Nazi, he's a terrible person? Are they going to go to a site that says, like, yeah, he's an awful human being? Or are they going to figure out that, no, he's actually not that bad. Like, he's not a terrible human being, and it's a good thing that he wins appeal. So I think that's important, like, making sure that, hey, we're showing, like, we're actually, like, putting out information like that on social media and all sorts of things, saying, like, hey, he's actually not what a lot of people say he is. And that goes for everything, of course. This is just one scenario. This is just specifically in the case of Tommy Robinson, and this could apply to pretty much anyone when they're in the news, to make sure, like, you're winning the argument, you're winning the case, you're showing people, like, you're stopping people from slandering other people. But no, I think this is fantastic. It's just like it's where do we go from here? And like the answer to that basically is like we move forward, we do what we always did, but we gotta learn something from this. We gotta make this beneficial somehow. And remember that Tommy Robinson, like this was expensive. This whole hearing was expensive. I mean, court fees and that, and obviously like he's caring for his family, or he couldn't care for his family while he was in prison. Stuff like that. You gotta remember that this was tough. This cost so much money, and that all this money basically, instead of going to now going to like Tommy's legal fund and all that, it could have gone to so many other things. It could have gone to other activism. It could have gone to like research and education. It could have gone to all sorts of things, all sorts of charities. That's now wasted, and that's unfortunate. And of course, I'm not saying like good that everyone gave their money. Like fantastic that everyone gave their money to Tommy. Like good for you. I'm all for that. Like wonderful. That's a good thing that you were good. You were nice enough to give your own money to help him out. Like that's awesome. I'm not putting that down at all. But it's important to remember that, like, where is your money going? Like, is it going to things that could be avoided, or is it going to actual activism in that? And it's unfortunate. It's just like we have to focus on really like making the best use of our time, making the best use of our resources. And unfortunately, we're limited. We're the little guys here. But no, that's important. I just think all this stuff is so important right now, and we have to keep all of this stuff in mind, like when we're doing stuff. Like, of course, if anyone watching this isn't aware, like I'm not in the UK, so I can only say this from an outside perspective as someone from the United States. I can only like look on this from the outside, but of course this is applying to everything. I'm just saying, like, watch out for the laws, watch out for what's going on. Like, we can't afford to slip up. And I don't know if you could consider what Tommy did a slip up. It seems like he should have been aware that he broke the law, or that they could have gotten him for something like that, whether legitimate or not. But like this is awesome. We did not expect this. At least I did not expect this. So the fact that it's happening is absolutely great. But we could not be this like. It could have been much worse. And that's all I'm saying. Just like be on your toes in terms of law, in terms of activism and all that. Just take care of yourself. But no, that's all I had to say. That's pretty much just wanted to talk. Just wanted to put some stuff out there saying like, hey, like we have to be very careful with what we're doing. We have to be very careful with making sure that like we're learning from this. We're making the best use of our time. And this is great. Like, this is what's happening here is wonderful, but it's not over yet. That is much. That we can't let our guard down. We have to focus on not breaking the law. We have to focus on, like, activism, of course, networking, correcting any lies that come out. But whatever everyone's doing, if anyone gave money to Tommy Robinson, like you people that did, fantastic. And we'll just keep moving forward from here. We'll just keep going. But anyways, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and thanks for watching.